Hello again and welcome back to yet another tutorial. In this training we are going to be working with a real Magento2 module and we're going to add some functions to it and cover them with tests. We will also be using this conference page, unit testing with PHPUnit, where we have some good information. We have a couple of recordings and we also have some blog posts gathered here for you as a beginner in PHPUnit. But for now, I also assume that you have watched this video, how to run PHPUnit tests inside of PHP Store, because that is what we will do. And we are going to be basing our tests or our training using this module, Vimo module TDD calculator. And we are going to start with this specific version, 0.1.0. So let's get started. I have already imported this project locally into clean Magento2 TDD. So I'm just going to go straight into this project repository instead of importing it. And then I will run aya project add module Vimo module TDD calculator and then the specific version in mind. Alright, and there we go. So let's go into PHP Store and let's see what we have. So inside of our vendor folder we have Vimo and here we should have our new module. So let's synchronize Vimo and here we have it. So as you can see, we don't really have any files other than the basic files for a module, and usually when you do test-driven development you are supposed to create your tests and you're supposed to run them. They will then of course fail because you don't have any real production code. So then you need to go and create your production code and then run your tests again, and hopefully they should then work and be green. But in this case I'm going to first create my production code, my real function that I want to use, and then I'm going to cover it with a test, just so that it's easy for you to see what I'm doing. So let's create a new folder. So I will type Command N and create a new directory, and I will create a block folder here. And inside of here I'm going to create a new class which I will call calculator, like this, .php. I'm too lazy, so I'm going to copy some other files. So I will go into here and copy the basic structure of this file. So we have the license, and I'm going to change this to my namespace, which is TDD calculator, and then just block. I don't need this, and I need to close this one. And we can remove this for now, and the name of my class is calculator. Calculator. Alright, so I have a basic class here. And inside of here, I'm going to create a function. Public function, and I will call this one add. And what are we going to do? We are going to take two arguments, so x and y. We are then going to sum them, so sum is equal to x plus y. And then we are simply going to return sum. And I think that you can agree with me that we're pretty sure that this will work. So let's now jump into our test. All tests, they should live inside of a test folder. So inside of my module repository, I'm going to create a new directory, which will be called test. And since we are writing unit tests, we need to create a new folder called unit. And inside of here, we can now create our first test file. And I'm going to, well, first you can see that we have this file, calculated.php. This is the class that we want to test. And this class lives inside the block folder. So we need to create a new folder inside here called block, and here we can now create a new file. We can here go to the very bottom and choose PHPUnit and a PHPUnit test. So the class that we want to test is calculator. So let's see if we can find it. If I go here, we have it here selected. So this is the class that we want to test, and the name for this test that I'm going to create will be calculator test, and I then need to specify the namespace. I could copy the namespace for the actual class that we're going to test, which is this one, and we then need just to make sure that we include the test and unit folder. So let's add that into our namespace, and this will be the file name for the class calculator test, and here we can specify where we want to save this file into this directory. So if I now click OK, we have this file. So you can see now that we have block calculator, and inside of test unit we have a block calculator test. Pretty easy, right? I'm just going to copy this license and replace this one like this. Looks much better now. And here you can see that our calculator test class is extending PHPUnit framework test case. Alright, I'm going to do one more thing, and that is to configure my test run suite here. So I will go into edit configurations, and this is what I covered in the previous video tutorial. And I'm going to add a new configuration, and I will choose PHPUnit, and the directory that I want to test is my project, and the module is module tdd calculator. And I will choose this PHPUnit XML file, and that's it. So I'm going to click OK. I forgot to name this one, so I'm going to name it to the same thing as my module, and I'm going to run it. So let's see what happens. Well, we get our first error, and that is that we don't have any test found in this class. So let's add this. Public function, and the way that you should name your test is always to prefix them with test and then the actual name of your method. So in this case it's add, so I will type it, I will name it test add. A good practice is also that you should name your test something that explains what they are supposed to do. In this example, test add should return sum of two numbers, and here is not the place where you want to have short names. Here you should really have good method names that describes what is happening, because when you have a lot of tests and you're running them and one of them fails, you want to easily understand what's happening, what the test is supposed to do. So this is a pretty good name according to me. And before we continue, we need to create a setup function. So I will go back to our holy documentation here, and I'm going to copy this part, protected function setup. So I'll copy this one into here, and I'm going to remove this one, and I'm going to create an object. Instead of export post, I'm going to call it calculator like this. And instead of testing this class that we have here, I'm actually going to test, if I go back here, I'm going to copy this namespace over here, and I'm going to put it here, and then the class name, which is calculator. Perfect. Now we need just to declare our protected object manager so that it doesn't complain here, and protected calculator. Alright, so let's have a quick recap. We are creating this object manager using this that is included in Magento core, and then we are creating this calculator using this object manager, and we are getting this specific object, and this is the class that we want to test here. Alright, so what we can do now is to type this calculator, and then we can call our function, which is add, and here we are going to send in 7 and 3. The return value from this function, we are going to store it in our result, which is equal to this, and then we have to mock our expected result. So expected is equal to, in this case, 10, right? Alright, so now that we have our result and expected, we can assert that these two values are equal to each other. So if you start typing this assert, you have a couple of options. For example, you have assert true to just test for a specific condition. But in this case, we want to use assert equals. And here we're going to send in one expected value, which is this one, 10, and the actual result. So, moment of truth. Let's see what happens if I now run my test. We see that it's passing. What would happen if I change my production code later so that this becomes this? If I go back to my test, actually I don't need to go back to my test, I can just stay in here and run my test, or simply type Command R, and we will now see that it's failing the test. So it's asserting that 2.63 matches expected 10. So if I now change this back to this and I run the test, it's back to green. And that is basically how you write your test. You have your setup function that is calling your object over here, and then you are calling your function, in this case this add method. You are sending a couple of arguments, and you're storing that into a result variable. Then you are mocking your expected result, and then you just make sure that expected is equal to result. And that's it. Let's now create a new function, and we will do this the real way. So we will start by creating our test. So I'm too lazy. I'm going to copy this one, and I'm going to let's see, we are going to test subtract should return diff of two numbers. So I'm going to change this one to subtract, and I'm going to send 10 and 5, and the expected result here is of course 5. So let's see what happens if I now run this. It will then complain that we are calling an undefined method, and this is exactly what we want. So we can now go back to our class over here and create a new function and call this one subtract, and this should then be x minus y. So if I now run this again, I see that I have misspelled this. Subtract like this. So let's run this again, and now my two tests are working. Alright, that was it for this short tutorial. In the next training we are going to take this up a little bit more, and we are going to test for different types of scenarios. So instead of just using assert equals, we are going to look into some other ways of asserting our tests. That was it for today, and see you soon again. Bye bye!